Yo, what's happening, guys? It's GM Cody back with another video. It has been a couple weeks since I've done a video. Don't really have an excuse other than I've just had a lot of other things going on. But tonight we are going to continue our review of Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader. Now, I don't have the physical book here. It's back there on the bookshelf, but that's fine. Usually I hold it up and say what we're going to talk about, but this will be the final part. This will be part 3, looking at Warhammer 40,000 First Edition Rogue Trader. We're going to wrap that up tonight, and then we're going to move on to something else. So we don't have a whole lot more to wrap up here with this part 3. We have just a little bit more to do here. Basically, we've looked at the rules. We started looking at the background. We started looking at the bestiary. And tonight we're going to continue going through the bestiary and also take a look at the appendixes where they discuss advanced rules and campaign rules and modeling tips. And all the stuff in the back of the book is what we're going to look at. And this is probably not going to be as long of a overview as it was with the previous 2 videos. But nonetheless, that's what we are doing tonight. So let's jump right into it, shall we? So last we left off, we were talking about, we talked about the Imperium, and tonight, and we talked about like all the different parts of the Imperium. We also talked about the orcs a little bit and kind of skimmed over that. We all know what orcs are, right? If you've played Warhammer in the past, you know what orcs are. And we move on to the Slann. So the Slann are something that definitely got left behind in the Rogue Trader era. And the Slann are space lizard men, essentially, right? They do not get mentioned really ever again in 40K. I think they get mentioned briefly in some further editions, but nowadays they've pretty much been left behind. And as far as like a playable race that you can play in the game, they were left behind right here in the very first book, which is unfortunate because the Slann are really cool. So basically what the Slann are in 40K terms, or in Rogue Trader terms, is that they are essentially supposed to be the first, or one of the first races that spread out amongst the galaxy, and they were the first like technologically superior race. Now there were other races around the way they talk about it, but they're one of the oldest races or species alive in the galaxy. And basically their whole thing is they kind of jump-started other cultures throughout the galaxy, and that includes Earth. They mention in the description here of the Slann that they actually visited Earth and jump-started the human evolution, that they jump-started a lot of the other evolutions of all these other races across, the universe. So the Slann are really cool. They're a lot more than just space lizard men, right? And that's really cool. It also does mention also in the space Slann is that they're that they're a dying race, and that there's not many of them around, and that there's 2 separate types of them. So there's the advanced, technologically advanced Slann, the ones from ancient times that went around the universe spreading technology and jump-starting evolution. But there's also these primitive Slann that have been left behind on other planets that are a lot more technologically primitive than their brothers and sisters. So really interesting race, and it's really unfortunate that they were, left behind in this edition of 40K, because I really like the space lizard men. I think they're really cool, and I've always wanted to make a little warband or small army of Slann. So that's basically the Slann, and we get some. Of course, we get the profiles like we did with all the other species. We get a little bit of structure here with their society, and that's the Slann. The Dracario. So the Dracario are a ape-like primate race that again was jumped off evolutionary by the Slann. And their whole purpose, basically, in society is to create technology. And that's what they do. They just create all these great technological trinkets and stuff. But other than that, like they're not like they're kind of odd in that they're just like very one track minded and just creating like the best technology they can, and not so much in creating other things. Sorry, I'm going to get rid of that little sidebar there so you guys don't have to look at that. But a lot of the Jacario technology is very, very wanted throughout the whole universe, right? And the Jacarios definitely got left behind as well. Though they're still around today. I think there's some mention of them, and the Jacario devices are definitely mentioned. I think in even modern 40K, even though I haven't looked at what modern 40K is doing. But last time I played, which was not that long ago, maybe a decade or so ago, in the current editions, the Jacarios were still being mentioned, and their technology was still being mentioned. So they basically create very sought after and interesting technology is what they do. And they look like ape men, essentially. It's kind of like a Planet of the Apes kind of thing. Here we get another cool piece. Definitely, it's an homage to the famous World War II photography from the Pacific. I think that was on Iwo Jima, if I'm not mistaken, of the American Marines raising the flag. Well, here you have Space Marines raising the flag of looks like the Space Wolves, which is a very cool homage. I really like that. Next up, we get a mention of the Tyranids, and the Tyranids are here in Rogue Trader, though they're not as varied and they haven't been fleshed out as much as they will in the next edition, of course. In second edition, they get a full-blown codex, and they get a lot of interesting ideas and different sub types of the Tyranids. But in here, they're just Tyranids. They're just one type, and that's what they look like, which looks a lot like the Termagants. They're kind of a mix of the Gene Stealers and Termagants that we'll see later. But basically, Tyranids are just one type in this, and they're essentially the same. They have the hive fleets, and they're spreading across the galaxy or spreading across the universe and trying to take it over and all that good jazz. I mean, they're basically the aliens from Alien, right? Essentially, not quite, but it's essentially what they are. And so this is the early kind of prototype of the Tyranids, and they're definitely missing a lot of the flavor that they would get later on, but they're still. All the seeds are born here with the hive fleets and all that stuff is definitely here, right? And so, yeah, that's the Tyranids. Next, we get the Zotes, and this is another species that was left behind in this edition. I don't think the Zotes ever get mentioned again, really. And basically what they are is they were one of they were engineered slave race of the Tyranids, and they look kind of like centaurs. I don't think they have a picture in here. We did look at one of the miniatures. They did make miniatures for Zotes during the Rogue Trader days, and we looked at that in, I think, the first or second review. I can't remember off the top of my head, but just Google Zotes and you'll see what a Zote looks like. But they look like basically like centaur, Umbra Hulk kind of creatures, and they've become their own like independent society. And next we get into like a bestiary of all kinds of weird and strange creatures. And the first up is warp creatures, and all the different creatures that come through from the warp, right? And the warp is pretty much the same as it is today, right? It spawns all these weird, strange creatures. And I was about to say we didn't get a picture of Zotes, where there's the Zotes right there. Let's zoom in on that. There you go. There's the Zotes. And I'm going to move this over so you guys can just get a quick picture of that. Yeah. That's what the Zotes look like. Kind of very like centaur, buff kind of centaur kind of creatures. And let's zoom back out so we can get a view on this. So you have all these different warp creatures now. This is right before they thought, I think they were, sorry about that. I don't know, again, if they originally thought about introducing chaos into the Warhammer 40,000 universe. So again, we don't get any mention of like the demons or the chaos gods or any of that stuff. And I can't remember off the top of my head if chaos had been introduced to fantasy yet or not. I don't think it really had, loosely maybe. So the idea of all that hadn't quite come to fruition yet. But here's a lot of the hints of it, right? Is all these different warp creatures and strange beings that come from the warp dimension, right? So you have like astral hounds, which are very reminiscent of like folklore, right? These wild hellhounds and stuff that come from other dimensions and places and stuff. Astral specters, enslavers, which are really cool. These dimensional beings that literally enslave your mind and your body and control other beings. Whatever this is, Psychonunian, vampires. I think literally vampire? Yeah, literally vampires. Warp entities, just various different warp entities that you can make up. Zombies. And these are just examples. I think what they're trying to do here is encourage you to make up your own strange warp creatures, right? And then we get into some aliens, and again, these are just examples that you could use. The Ambul, which is a very famous creature, a very cool one, definitely kind of a take on the Umber Hulk. I just was talking about Umber Hulks, but the Ambul always reminded me of an Umber Hulk, but it also kind of reminds me of the aliens from This Island Earth. If you've ever seen This Island Earth, they kind of remind me of that. They kind of remind me of a mix of like an Umber Hulk from D&D, AD&D, and the big-headed aliens from This Island Earth. And I'm sure that was partially the inspiration. Bouncers, carnivorous sand clam, Catachan devil, Catachan face eater. And here we get the first mention of Catachan, which would become one of the death worlds, the jungle death worlds of 40K. And of course, Catachan would become a very infamous world in later editions of 40K, because that's where the Catachan jungle fighters come from, the Imperial Guard regiment. We have crawlers and Crotolid and, Cathelian Cudbear and dinosaurs and pharaoh beasts, gene stealers. So we get a mention of gene stealers here. But the gene stealers are not the gene stealers of the Tyranids. This is the gene stealers as mentioned in Rogue Trader here, and you can see this picture. A little bit different and definitely very reminiscent of aliens, right? I think this is actually more aliens than the Tyranids. And of course the gene stealers would change very quickly, but this was the original conception of the gene stealer, which was straight up like, the xenomorph from Aliens. Giant insects and the giant spiders and groks and Gyrinix and horse and lashworms and mimics, petrosquirrel and razor wings and rippy fish and swarms, sunworms, Catachan brainleaf. Lots of things on Catachan. Catachan must be an awful place. Alien plants and creepers and floaters, gas fungi, and here we get different kinds of fungi, and this is really cool. And I think this like cactus here, I want to make sure you guys can see it, is definitely the inspiration for, the infamous cacti terrain that became so famous in the 1990s, or probably towards the end of Rogue Trader, right before second edition came out. And second edition, this has become synonymous with 40K, like old school 40K terrain. And I think this picture might have been the impetus of that. I'm not sure on that, but I'm just thinking it probably was. Rain spores, different kinds of killer plants, spongeweed and tangle fungus and Venus mantrap. And here we get more about the death worlds and the flora and fauna of the death worlds and what a death world is made up of. And the whole concept of the death world is made up here in Rogue Trader, right? Like I said before, all these concepts right here made up by Rick Priestley and co. Probably mostly by Rick Priestley, but I do know that the other guys working at GW contributed some things here and there. Like the Tyranids was not a thing. I don't think that Rick Priestley came up with that. It was somebody else. But a lot of these concepts Rick Priestley came up with, right? But, you know, he was inspired by other things and other people that were working there at Games Workshop at the time. And here we get a really useful creature chart for rolling it for game masters so they can roll up their own weird creatures, right? Plant charts, rolling up plants. These are just like random encounter charts. Okay. And we get these cool art here. I really like this one here. This is really cool. Really dig this one. Very cool piece of art. And this one's really cool, even though it's a really sketchy. It's really hard to see, but like the Space Marine, he's got like the the sun blocking welder visor on, shooting. I guess he's just shooting a bolter, but I don't know. It's really bright, so it must be some kind of like beam particle weapon or something. And I really like this one too, of like the council, maybe like a rogue traders council looking at the planet and making decisions about what they're going to do. And this dude right here with like the implant and stuff, very cool. And you get some, you got a couple Space Marines looking on in the background. And this is one of my favorites here. This 2-page spread of this. It must be like a hive world or a death world or something. I would assume like a death world, like this kind of like Mad Max looking world. And you get this kind of 2-page montage of this post-apocalyptic environment. And you get this guy, like this hobo, punk rock, post-apocalyptic dude with like an anarchy belt, smoking a cigarette. This guy with his like fur cape and skulls, riding his jet bike. And then you get like this picture, which is just awesome, right? Like this 40K cantina, basically, of all these characters. Got like this squat and this cool Eldar girl, and this maybe like half orc Ogren dude here, and yeah, really cool. These pictures are cool too. Some more spreads here, like some Space Marines and arresting this punk rocker dude. And like two dudes like racing on jet bikes. Another, it looks like a Mad Max kind of gang or something, like, or maybe like I don't really know what's going on there, but it's pretty cool. Some more scenes here. I really like these things. These like walker guys, really cool art. And then we get these. These are really cool too, man. I really dig these. They definitely remind me of these little pieces of art. Remind me a lot of the Eastman and Layard like Ninja Turtles art, a lot. And this is really cool stuff. So you get like different kinds of like street punks and gangers and orc slavers, hill bandits, mercenary gang warriors, and water sellers and guards, miners at work and relaxing, and all this stuff. Very cool. Like just like kind of common folk of the 40K universe. Very cool. This is a cool picture too. These Space Marines facing off against this giant spider walker thing. And then we get into like advanced gamer stuff, and it just kind of goes into some stuff you can add to your game and a way to like do different things in your game. It's a lot of advice, and it's maybe a few extra rules in here. These are cool pieces of art. Don't want to miss these. This one's really, really cool. It looks very Ian Miller-ish, but I'm not really sure if it is or not, but very cool. Another cool piece here. Yeah, so just some more like advanced stuff about like terrain and like some little like tidbits and advice about how do you play your game, and some more advanced rules for planetary landings, which is really cool, and rules for campaigns, which is really good. And the rules for campaigns in this are really cool, and we get all kinds of information about running campaigns, probably more than we ever did, except in maybe my exception would be the 3rd edition version of 40K, which I'm not sure we'll ever look at, but the 3rd edition 40K had a lot of great information about running campaigns. And next to that, Rogue Trader, I think Rogue Trader in 3rd edition had the best advice for running a campaign, and the 3rd edition is a little bit more detailed. So they give you advice about how to do a campaign and keeping a narrative going. rules for casualties in between battles, severe injuries to common soldiers, loss of vehicles and equipment, injury charts for characters, which is really cool in between battles if they take injuries, and a giant plot generator, which is awesome. So you roll like a D100, for all these different plots to generate, a plot for your narrative scenarios, which is what Rogue Trader 40K is all about, right? So these could give you some really rad ideas. And of course, we got this really, the cover spread again, but it's still a rad picture of the Crimson Fist's last stand, which I love. But this plot generator is amazing. And then we get into some hobby advice. And the hobby advice is really cool too. So collecting and painting your miniatures. And they have this 2-page spread of like there's really young Rick Priestley and some other guys from the studio, which I can't identify the rest of these guys, but they're playing some games of 40K, and I really love these scratch built buildings that they look like they just made out of like packing tubes, and they're awesome looking, right? And like very old school, and like all these, it's just lichen and model trees and packing terrain, and these styrofoam buildings that they made out of just scraps, which they do, or like pudding cups and stuff, which they do talk about here in a minute. And some more pictures of these guys playing, and just get you really excited about wanting to play this game and getting involved. And this is something I loved about old school Warhammer in general, is they always had these kind of pictures of the guys in the studio or just regular people playing the games. And it always got me excited as a youngster wanting to play these games. But really what they're doing here is, this part is about collecting and painting your figures and how to go about that. And basically the advice they're giving is that, even though this game revolves around GM setting up a scenario, the GM shouldn't be the one taking the brunt of collecting all the figures, that everybody should be collecting some figures here and there, and they should be brought together for these narrative, collaborative scenarios. So really cool. We get some more shots of the classic Eldar, which I love the classic Eldar, and especially love their tiger striped helmets. And they're giving you more hobby advice about how to clean your models, and how to prime your models, and how to paint your models, which is not advice I got from the get-go, but I soon learned all this stuff from books like this. But I think it's really cool that they gave you all this hobby advice. And of course, in other further iterations of Games Workshop products, they had a lot of this stuff too. But in here, they have a lot of this, and a lot of this is still relevant today about how to paint a miniature and stuff. And they go through the process of painting one of these plastic Space Marines, and it has a whole list of what you should do here. Improving your painting techniques, and it has a bunch of still relevant, techniques today: blacklining and shading and highlighting and washing, dry brushing, details. They even have a shading chart in here, to tell you, if you're at this base color, this is what your shades should be. We get some more cool art here, and this is a really cool piece. It looks like some Space Marines breaking into like an orc vessel of some sort, which is really cool. Modeling. I do like this, the hoarding impulse, which is something that is still relevant today and plagues a lot of us hobbyists, right? But this goes into modeling and constructing different types of terrain, which is, a lot of this is very old school, but very cool and still relevant, like, still relevant advice. This is a very infamous 2-page spread here where we get all these like hive gangers and mutants and stuff. But actually, and this has been pointed out 100 times, all these people were a part of the Games Workshop staff at the time. Now I can't identify all these people, but you got John Blanche in there, you got Jervis. I don't know if you got Jervis. Might have Jervis. Yeah, it might be Jervis. The Perry twins there. Rick Priestley, I don't think is in here. I think might supposed to be Rick, or I don't know. But anyways, you have a lot of all the GW staff is pretty much represented here, and it's really cool. This is a really cool 2-page spread, and everybody that talks about Rogue Trader points this out, so. And then we get some examples about how to make terrain out of just junk laying around your house. So here's, Project 1, how to create those control towers out of different, pudding cups and stuff. Plaster dome, how to make these plaster domes. The residential buildings, how to make those residential buildings, which we looked at earlier, which I think are really cool, actually. They kind of remind me of the buildings in, like, the Dragon Ball universe, which is cool. This is a cool picture here. I don't know what these guys are, these techno-barbarian mutants guys. This guy's got like a Sten machine gun, World War II machine gun. This guy's got like a cannon coming out of his chest. But that is very Rogue Trader and very awesome. And then we get a summary of all the rules that they went over. So you have like the turn sequence and moving and hiding, shooting, wound, etc., etc. Vehicles, how to generate, it basically gives you a summary of all the rules for vehicles and hand-to-hand and shooting and movement, armor, all the different equipment, and then different author's notes here on language and technology. Another little story here, and another cool scene of our first look ever of a battle sister, which at this time they don't mention. I don't think they really mention the battle sisters. They might briefly. Yeah, I think they do, actually. I can't remember. I'd have to look. Let me know if they do. I can't remember if they do or not. But here we do get a picture of a battle sister, and I do like how she has the spiky nipple on her armor. That's really cool. And she looks badass, by the way. She looks really cool. Sister Sin. Yeah, she's got like this skull here. Always like the battle sisters. And they shall know no fear. Some more summary of stuff. This is a very cool picture. I'm not sure what's going on here, but I really dig it. Timeline of the Rogue Trader universe. We get a play sheet, which this play sheet is really not my favorite in this blue color. It's kind of hard to read. Your different templates that you're going to need, and of course you would photocopy those and cut them out, or cut them out of the book, which I suspect some people did back then. And then finally, like I was mentioning in part 2, I believe, is the scenario of the battle at the farm. They have the summary sheets in the back here, the briefing sheets, that you would hand out to your players if you were playing the battle at the farm. And so they have a sheet for the orcs and all their equipment, and the Space Marines, same thing. Space Marine brief, here's a full brief of the situation and the scenario, and a map of the scenario. Orcs get the same thing with all their missions and objectives. And then you get these cool little counters that you would photocopy or cut out of the back of the book. And you could use for miniatures. If you didn't have miniatures, you could play the Battle of the Farm. And then finally, you get a unit record sheet, a roster sheet that we're, old school 40K players are all too familiar with. And I'm definitely familiar with these, and I used them a lot. I still use them today. Again, I don't really like the blue, though. Hate to say it. And an advertisement in the back for some of the first 40K miniatures. The big box of Imperial Space Marines, the plastic ones, the Space Orc Raiders, and you also get an advertisement back here for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and Warhammer Fantasy Battle, which it looks like, from the looks of this, they're still advertising 2nd edition stuff, but they have, it's still 2nd edition. Interesting. I don't know. Maybe 3rd edition hadn't come out yet, because all this stuff is 2nd edition. And then finally we get to the back of the book. And there we go. Hey, 30 minutes, and we covered the rest of Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader. And look, this took 3 parts. I said it would take a little while. I know a lot of you guys have been enjoying this. I hope you guys really have enjoyed this. If you have, make sure to give me a thumbs up. It's really appreciated. I do want to take a moment to say that what else is coming up for the channel. So first off, Friday, I will be back on the Crown of Command, and it looks like that's probably going to be a regular thing. Me and Josh have been talking. And I think we're going to be doing some regular live streams. We're going to alternate between the Crown of Command, his channel, and my channel. And we're going to kind of be doing a little bit of a monthly kind of video cast, a podcast, if you will, about different topics about wargaming, specifically probably talking about old school Warhammer most of the time, but we're going to be talking about other things in wargaming, and we're going to have some guests on. So this week we're going to have Kent Fury on. Now, I'm not familiar with Kent, but apparently he's really well known and respected in the Warhammer 40,000 second edition community. And this week we're going to be talking about Warhammer 40,000 second edition, my favorite game of all time. So make sure to check that out on the Crown of Command channel. Of course, I will be posting a link to that in my community feed. So make sure to tune in to that. And then hopefully next week, we're going to go back to original D&D, and we're going to take a look at Chainmail. And we're going to be talking about that. Yes, another war game, but it does tie into original Dungeons & Dragons. And I want to talk about Chainmail before we move on to the supplements. And I'm going to be we're going to be talking about, again, we're going to continue our talk about original D&D and going through all the supplements and all that jazz. But in between there, I think I'm going to do one video, like kind of alternate videos. So next week, we're going to talk about Chainmail as a war game. I'm going to take a break and talk about something else. We're going to go back to, I think we're going to probably do another video about OD&D and just backwards and forwards like that, because I need a little bit of breather talking about D&D. I like talk about some other stuff too. But Chainmail should be really interesting, and I think I'm going to make that like a two-parter, which I think I've already said. So tune into that next week. The other thing, I'm going to go ahead and announce it. Hopefully this works out, so no guarantee, but I'm going to try to make it work, is I have been working on an Imaginations war game campaign with my buddy Andrew. So if you don't know what Imaginations is, basically this is a very old concept in wargaming that dates back to the Stone Age of war games, back in the days of Charles Grant and Donald Featherstone and Tony Bath and all those guys from the 60s and 70s, where you basically take a historical period of time and their technology, but you make up your own maps and cultures and societies around that, and then fight fictional battles in your own world. So it's a lot like making up like a D&D world, but more grounded and based in like history. So I am going to do a classic 18th century Imaginations campaign based in my Imaginations world that I've created between two fictional German-like states called, hold on a second, I forget already, Brottenheim and Moravia, and they will be fighting over the country of Dunderland. And so I'll talk more about this when we get into it. But basically, I've been creating this Imaginations thing. I've always been interested in that idea, and then I was watching some videos by Henry Hyde recently. And if you haven't checked out Henry Hyde and you're into wargaming, make sure to go check out his stuff. He's a very renowned wargamer. He's written several books, and he's very heavy into Imaginations, and that kind of got my imagination fired up to really do like an Imaginations thing. And I was originally going to run this solo, but my friend Andrew said he would like to play with me. Now, Andrew lives, thousands of miles away from me, so we can't play in person. So we're going to be playing the battles on Tabletop Simulator, and we're going to be doing a full-blown map campaign. I made a map, which let's see if I can bring up the map for you real quick. Yeah, there we go. So here is the map of Dunderland, and the country we'll be fighting over. And this is a province of the Kingdom of Moravia, and there's a whole backstory to it and everything, but we'll talk about that later. But anyways, I've been hard at work on this, and I can't get this out of my brain, so we're going to be doing this, and we should be kicking it off probably this week, maybe here in the next few days. So I've been really excited about doing that, and I'm going to record it and break it up into digestible chunks for you guys and be doing a narration over the top of the different campaign moves. And then when we actually play a battle, we're going to play it out in Tabletop Simulator. I'm going to record those and do some narration over the top of that. So hopefully you guys enjoy that, and hopefully you guys like the sound of that. And not to fear, we'll be doing some more role-playing stuff. So coming up, I forgot to mention, coming up Thursday, we'll be continuing our Palladium Fantasy campaign, and possibly Sunday we'll be continuing the AD&D 2nd Edition campaign. That's a lot of games going on, so I don't know if I can do all that in one week. I might have to push one game back or the other, just to give myself some breathing room. But either way, I'll be running. I'm probably going to run the Palladium game and push back the AD&D game, because I like those to fall on different weeks, so I don't have it muddled up in my brain. But anyways, look forward to that, and we'll definitely be talking about some more role-playing games in the future. If some of you guys are just here for role-playing games. But it seems like some of you guys enjoy the War Games content. So anyways, I'll stop yakking. I will let you guys get back to your day or night or whatever it is. I hope you guys have a good night. We'll see you next time. Peace.